So, what happened to me? I hear that shit all the time lately, and it always confuses me. Because it's easy for me to forget that this will be my first video that I've uploaded to my channel in about a year. I mean, I didn't upload anything in 2018. I uploaded, I think, 9 videos in 2017. So people have had 9 videos in 2 years, which isn't a great deal. And there's always a weird dissonance on YouTube between content creators and the audience in that my life doesn't stop outside of YouTube. Shit is constantly happening. So when somebody sees me arguing with somebody or taking a stance on an issue that they didn't think I would have because of assumptions that they've made or the perceptions that they have of who I am, it's natural for them to ask, you know, dude, what happened to you? This isn't what you're meant to be arguing. This isn't what you're meant to say. You're meant to say what I think you're meant to say. So I get it. It's natural. That question of what happened to you. I get that. I do get that. I don't get people starting a fucking poll and hypothesizing about how I must have like a feminist girlfriend or something now. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Also kind of sad. And the amount of people who seem to be one hand job away from completely changing their worldview on everything is just... just yikes. Big fucking yikes. Like, you don't think that you talking about how people changing their minds on something means that they must be getting laid is kind of exposing yourself? Just a tad. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. Just you know, it does not the best of looks. That's not even getting into how dogmatic you have to be to think that somebody reassessing their actions and place online couldn't have come from simply looking around them and feeling like they're stuck in a Bernard Buffett painting. I mean, I don't get these people, man. I really don't. Like getting laid on a semi-regular basis whilst getting dragged around to like fucking picnics and arts festivals and all this other pointless, stupid crap that you didn't want to do and would have never done had you not been dragged along to it. Like, why that would change my mind on these communities more than the stuff that's happening inside the communities. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's just, maybe it's me. I mean, I just don't think it's that deep. But as I was saying, to everyone else, it's natural to ask, you know, what happened to you? Because as limited as your scope of who I am and what I think is, it's not only limited by the amount of content that I'm willing to put out, it's also limited by the amount of content that you are willing to watch. I mean, you could go to pretty much any YouTuber's channel and you'll see that the first videos they uploaded will typically be the least watched. So not only are people missing out on why they started making videos and the circumstances which surrounded them making those videos, but they're also missing out on all the shit that happens when they're not making videos. So, you know, over time, that becomes a pretty considerable gulf. And I think that's what's happened with me and my channel, and most likely you. So, yeah, it deserves an answer. And the problem is, it's a really big question for me. So, it's gonna be 3 parts. Yep, you heard me. 3 parts. You wait a year for a video and then 3 come along at once. So, the last one is going to be about like the skeptic and anti-SJW community and the characters that reside in it. The second part will be about Kraut and Tea and that whole story, warts and all, partly because it's relevant to the question we're answering, but it's also an important story in general. I mean, it's important to understanding how online mobs work, and frankly, Kraut is a cautionary tale I think everyone should be aware of because it covers so much stuff. And trust me, I know you think that you're never going to be Kraut, but you have to understand, Kraut never thought he was gonna be Kraut. And you don't need to be the person the drama is focused on in order to just get annihilated by it. So many people got absolutely reamed by that drama who didn't have anything to do with it. They were just kind of adjacent to other people who were kind of involved, and their channels are dead. And of course, there's all the other people who just disappeared. So, you know, it's one thing that people are owed from Kraut, and it's one thing that they'll never get from Kraut. Because like the ability to be honest and forthright, it just isn't in Kraut's arsenal. Everything is through the lens of, but my subscribers and my reputation was. My man's in a fucking dream world.
Living in a dream! Cause love is wrapped in the dream, cuz.
But that brings us to this video. So what's this video about? This is going to be basically laying the foundation of everything. I'm going to talk about why I started my channel, how I started my channel, and in order to do that, we're going to have to talk about a little event called Gamergate. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. So the way I got involved in Gamergate actually started about 2 years before Gamergate was even a thing. So it's like late 2012 when I started hearing about a female video game critic getting massively harassed because of a Kickstarter, who many of you may have come to know as Anita Sarkeesian. Now, at this point in my life, I was stupidly busy. Like, I was in university, I was working like as much as I could, and I was taking care of 2 very sick elderly relatives, both of whom are now dead.
Great job.
So the amount of fucks I could give were very, very limited, but the fact that I heard about this at all is a testament to how much this was covered in the media, because that's where I heard about it. I didn't hear about it from some echo chamber of misogynistic trolls or boards or social media groups. At that time, I didn't do any of that stuff. Not only did I not have the time for it, but I hated social media, and to be honest, I still do. I mean, aside from commenting on YouTube videos, I avoided that like the plague. But I think I spoke before about how when I first watched Anita Sarkeesian's first Tropes vs. Women video, I literally crossed my fingers and clicked on the video whilst muttering to myself, please let this be good. Because I didn't want to have any complaints, because I didn't want to be thrown in with the harassment brigade I had read so much about. So I was disappointed when I watched that video and found myself unable to talk about it, not because I didn't want to or because I didn't have anything to say about it, but because literally anything but gushing praise of this video at that time was treated like a fucking death threat. For real, you couldn't talk about this stuff. And it sounds really weird to say that today, given the way the shit Gamergate spawned engulfed the internet like a fucking cancer. But there's a reason why most of the big name anti-SJW type people came from nowhere. There's a reason why prior to this nobody had heard of people like Shuon Head, Sargon or Chris Raygun, and all the other people who frankly at this point are so numerous I'm not even gonna bother trying to count them. There's a reason why they found an audience and grew so quickly. And that reason is because people were looking for a place where they could talk about this stuff, because the places where you could talk about this were so incredibly limited that any platform or forum with any kind of moderation in place would just shut it down. And as much as I've soured on Gamergate, I have to be real. The people who shoved me toward Gamergate, it wasn't the behavior and the actions of Gamergate people, it was the people they were arguing with. Like, there were some fucking awful people on both sides of that shit. And I'm not trying to go all Trump with Gamergate.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
But it's a simple reality that the stuff that you experience and see with your own eyes will be far more meaningful and impactful to you than shit other people say happened to them. It's just human nature. And I'll go into more of what I saw, which kind of put me where I ended up. But suffice to say, it had a lot to do with having a lot of really annoying and incredibly tedious conversations with really annoying and incredibly tedious people. And it was in one of these conversations that someone accused me of being a sock account for someone called Ben Spur. Now, upon hearing this, I thought to myself what you're probably thinking right now, which is, who the fuck is Ben Spur? So I googled Ben Spur and I found this article. It turned out that apparently Ben Spur made a beat up Anita Sarkeesian game on a website called Newgrounds, which is like really famous for Flash cartoons and Flash games and stuff like that. It primarily functions as a community kind of hub where artists and game designers and stuff can get together and collaborate on projects. And whilst on the surface this game may look and sound horrible, to anyone who is familiar with that site, they'll realize that these games are part of a long-standing tradition, partly because they're so easy to make. They're not made with the intent to be simulations allowing you to take your frustrations out on random celebrities, or worse still, the women.
Fuck me!
They're satirical. The satire is in their existence. It's in the realization of you clicking the play button and thinking, ha! Someone actually made this.
Warn everyone! The enemy is coming in like a flood!
Get me!
These games have been made for Bill Gates, the Backstreet Boys,
Cowabunga.
Eminem, George Bush, Osama Bin Laden, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Britney Spears, Kim Kardashian, Lady Gaga, fucking Donald Trump. Yep, even the Donald has one.
Everybody knows what I'm saying is true.
He has a bunch of them, actually, now that I think about it.
Going into the atmosphere. Put any...
My father.
So the fact that a games journalist took the opportunity to demonize the website and those games was very weird to me, because you'd expect that games journalist to understand the community and the games given their history. And you know, I can't help but feel that the person who wrote this article did get those games and did understand that community. Right up until it became a convenient networking opportunity for them to not understand the games and the community. And before anyone gets all antsy in the comments and stuff, just trust me, in a minute, you're gonna find out who that journalist is. And it's gonna make a lot of sense. A lot of dots are gonna start being connected for you. And the article itself is kind of whatever, you know, nobody really comes across particularly well. The games journalist seems like a complete moron, and Ben Spur is kind of But the assertion in this article that Newgrounds point-and-click beat-up games are reinforcing a narrative that it's okay to beat up women is a really weird stance for a gaming publication to take. Because if that would apply here, it would also apply to a whole bunch of other stuff. Like this guy, who the games media, by and large, did everything they could to demonize the hell out of. So it was a really weird hill to die on, and it's a stance which, if popularized and taken to its logical conclusion, would be akin to taking creative expression around the back of a shed and shooting it in the fucking head.
Why?
You're droning on.
And also, on that note, before anyone even says it, yes, I'm aware Gamergate attempted to lionize Jack Thompson, and yes, that was really, really fucking weird. But it doesn't detract from the point. It actually plays into my point. Because the content of the article isn't the really interesting thing here, nor is probably the deliberately antagonistic way it was written. Today, in 2019, current year, current day, current time, the really interesting thing is who wrote this article. Because the person who wrote this article is a gentleman you may know as Ian Miles Chong. Yeah. Ian Miles Chong, who went from writing articles like this at the start of Gamergate, whilst hanging out with people like Zoe Quinn and describing himself as a turbo-feminist, to writing articles like this at the end of Gamergate, whilst hanging out with people like Andy Raceworski and describing himself as a... I forget every time. Fucking hell. He fell off the cliff and hit every branch on the way down. Jesus Christ, Ian. But here's the issue. Does anyone really believe Ian Miles Chung has changed in any significant way? Does anyone really believe he can go from being a prime example of everything that was wrong with SJWs in like 2014 to a prime example of everything that's wrong with anti-SJWs in 2019, whilst being a significantly different person? I gotta be honest, I don't think so. I think what pissed me off about him in 2014 is the same thing that pisses me off about him in 2019. And he's not the only person from back then whose natural cuntiness has gradually come to the fore as time has gone on. Take Graham Linehan, for instance. What pissed me off about him in 2015 is what pisses everyone off about him in 2019. People in his circles just didn't recognize him as a cunt because he spent all of his time going, I support women and I'm a feminist. Oh, great, Graham. That's really great. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
But by the way, Graham, what about trans rights?
No, they don't get the rights.
I mean, it can't be a coincidence that I didn't know who Ian Miles Chung was when I read this article back in 2013, and I still didn't even realize he was the one who wrote this shit until about 6 months ago when I was retracing my own path through Gamergate and the whole anti-SJW thing, trying to work out if there was an exact point where it all went to shit or if it was just always that way. And then right there, right at the start of it, the article that made me start paying attention to this shit. And whose name is on it? Ian Miles fucking Chung. And I can't help but wonder, if that person had never mentioned the name Ben Spur to me, or if Ian Moles Chung had never wrote that fucking article, would I have bothered paying attention? Would I have given a shit? Would I have gotten involved in any capacity whatsoever? I genuinely don't know. And it makes you think. At least it makes me think. Makes me think about how many people could have gone a completely different way had things just been a little bit different. How much shit could have been avoided had people taken a moment to appreciate that not everyone was taking marching orders from 4chan or something awful forums.
Okay, say something fun to goons.
Die.
That a lot of people just kind of floated into this crap because they had the temerity to give a shit about an issue and thought there was an actual discussion going on. Makes me wonder if the term SJW would have been popularized. Makes me wonder if the alt-right would have been a thing. Makes me wonder if Heather Hay would still be alive. And I already know that there are people rolling their eyes upon hearing that, because that's part of the anti-SJW DNA, because who the fuck needs introspection or personal responsibility when you can just blame the left for quite literally anything and everything, which is a steaming pile of bullshit we may or may not be getting into later. The point is that lots of people got pulled between two you know, I don't even feel comfortable calling them extremes, because they weren't extremes, they were teams. Because where you ended up had really very little to do with your individual politics or any of that shit. I know progressive liberals who spent years being called right-wing because they heard this shit.
All white people are racist, all men are misogynistic, all cisgender people are transphobic.
And were like,
What?
so suddenly they're a right-wing reactionary. I know neocons who are considered to be raging SJWs because they think Sargon is a fucking moron. Fuck, apparently that applies to me as well now. Where you fall on this stuff seems to be entirely dependent on who you argued with and which team you pissed off first. And this may come across as me trying to make excuses for Gamergate and everything, and trust me, so not what I'm doing, and that will become very clear later on. What I'm doing is setting the stage for you to understand how people could fuck up this badly by the time Gamergate hit. Because as it turns out, yes, Gamergate was complete bullshit. Okay, so first things first, let's just get this out of the way. Most people that I know didn't really give a fuck about the whole Zoe Quinn thing, and whilst I'm aware that there are apparently a lot of people who only cared about that, I'm just trying to give my experiences and perception of the time as best I can to inform understanding. Most of the people that I was around got that it was none of their business who some random woman on the internet sleeps with. But there were things that came from it where you were like, okay, well, that's none of my business, but this other thing over here?
Well, that might be a problem.
Because games journalism has always been a corrupt cesspit.
If you were to be stranded on an island, and you could pick between eating only Doritos or drinking only Mountain Dew, what would you pick?
But we all understood why. Games journalists required access to games and studios to generate their content, and being consumer-facing, the only revenue stream they could rely on were advertisements from the same studios and publishers they were dependent on for that content. So we always understood that we were basically reading advertisements written by middlemen and shills who were essentially remoras sucking on the belly of the gaming industry. Then the indie scene took off and became a thing.
Don't touch my stuff!
Suddenly games were coming back to this fabled time where a fun concept, like unique visuals or just a really good narrative, like that was all you needed. We were getting back to a point where one person could have an idea, create something without needing to compromise their vision, and be capable of sharing a stage with a AAA Goliath. Suddenly we had this new place which wasn't driven entirely by PR drones and marketing assholes micromanaging projects with the goal of satisfying shareholders as opposed to the end user, putting short-term gains over the long-term health of an entire fucking medium, or as the kids call it, capitalism.
Got him!
It was a new thing, and it had the potential to be really inspiring. And I think for a while, it was. Because in this new landscape, games media and the so-called journalists within it finally had a role to play. They could finally do and be what they were meant to be, but were never able to be for circumstances outside of their control. They could have put eyes on great designers and games that people need to see. They could have been the champions for the new, the weird, the unknown, and for a while, it looked like they were. But then Gamergate hit, and despite all the bullshit that we will be going into later, we found they weren't being champions of the new, the weird, the unknown. They were being champions of their friends, colleagues, and associated cliques. Where before games journalists were corrupted by the nature of the financial conflicts of interest which ensured their survival, we now saw that even without those financial conflicts of interest, it didn't matter. These people were not being corrupted, they were just corrupt. And you started to get this picture of people who got into games journalism in their teens and 20s because the idea of playing video games and eating pizza all day seemed like the greatest job on the planet, suddenly finding themselves in their 30s and 40s and having spent a decade or two riding around in their office on scooters or having food fights whilst occasionally blogging about their experiences with Pokemon Go. It all started to seem a little bit empty. Suddenly it's not enough that they have one of the easiest jobs you could ever hope to do, now they want to be respected for it. Now, they want to be able to sit at a dinner party and not feel embarrassed to tell doctors and lawyers that they spent 3 days playing Smash Brothers whilst trying to hide their mustard-stained fingernails. Which, you know, I mean, to some degree, it's understandable. We all have friends or family who make us feel like we're wasting our fucking lives, but we deal with it ourselves. If we're unsatisfied with our job or station in life, we seek to improve it or change it. We don't make our shit other people's shit. Well, generally speaking. We don't expect the world to change for us, let alone confer more respect on us for continuing to do the same shit we've always done. And we especially wouldn't expect the world to fillet our fucking ego because we decided to become an insufferable cunt about what we do. I mean, whether it's pretentious assholes who were invited to a rooftop party at a 5-star hotel in Santa Monica to cover a video game and then provide everyone with an article about how much they don't give a shit about the game, but want us to know all about the canapes and how woke they are regarding the political situation in the Philippines. Or people trying to set themselves up as the self-appointed curators of a culture that they claim to fucking despise. I mean, you can say a lot about gamer culture, and believe me, in the coming months, we fucking will be. But you can't try to position yourself as some kind of cultural gatekeeper when trying to set yourself apart from that fucking culture. I mean, forgetting the personalities and the larger context of that whole thing for one moment, just strategically. That's a really fucking dumb move. And that's not even getting into the whole aspect of who the fuck is you to put yourself in that position in the first place. Like, I don't want to feed into anything here, but I can't help wonder how unchecked does your ego need to be for anyone to look at anything and announce to the fucking world, hey, you know what the main problem with that thing over there is? I'm not in charge of it. I mean, really? Really? You don't, no one's sitting around going, come the fuck on with that shit?
Look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the
curator.
No.
Trust me. Making games today is hard enough. The amount talented people with a clear vision of what they want to make get fucked with by the industry as it is already at its peak. Even if you are working solo on a project, you still need to live and pay bills whilst you're doing shit, unless you're comfortable with it taking like 10 years to make the fucking thing. And if you're not working solo, chances are you're gonna need to secure some kind of investment from somewhere to ensure people are paid. That investment will come with strings attached, which could potentially compromise what you intended to make.
I asked just one thing, just one itty bitty thing.
And you can only do that so many times before what you're making becomes completely unrecognizable to you, and you come to the realization that this isn't what you wanted to make, that your dream is dead and that you're killing yourself and your team to make a pile of shit that you've come to despise so much that the 100-hour work weeks you're putting in make you spiral into a full-blown mental breakdown, resulting you leaving the office one day and never returning, leaving the small but dedicated team you assembled who are willing to eat shit and lower wages hoping to get a bonus on the back end, well and truly fucked, not knowing what the fuck happened to you until years later they hear you're apparently making 70 grand a year walking dogs for 4 hours a day, leaving everyone involved to further question what the fuck they've been doing with their lives. Point being, the struggle's real. And the shit is hard enough without some mob of self-appointed capos of culture breathing down your fucking neck for not making your lead character a bisexual Nigerian with a limp. That was the stuff that I cared about. That was the discussion I wanted to have. That was the thing I felt was often left out of the discussion regarding this new wave of social justice critique. It's not that it didn't have a place, it was just blind and deaf to the realities of the medium, because despite the way that corner of the internet, as it was at the time, would talk about the need for games to grow up and how games can be art, there was always a lack of acknowledgement that games are art. And that's a much bigger subject that I want to talk about at some point, but knowingly or unknowingly, these critiques often completely omitted the idea that these games, no matter how shit they may be, are made by artists creating art. Because we've been doing this art thing for thousands of years at this point. We've learned some shit. It deserves some consideration. This was the stuff that I wanted to talk about. This was the stuff that I cared about. And you know what I found? No one gave a fuck. The majority of people who were against you would just insist that your arguments were a cover to promote a right-wing agenda and harass women. The majority of people who were supporting you would use your arguments as a cover to promote a right-wing agenda and harass women. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, you were fucked. And I mean, this of course doesn't apply to everyone or everything, but it's prevalent enough from my own experience to make me not feel weird pointing it out. That's why I feel like my entire existence on YouTube has been trying to pull back on the reins of the worst excesses of this bullshit, and I don't think people ever got that with my channel. I don't think people realized that was what I was trying to do. I don't think people realized that I was trying to create a space for people to kind of fucking, I don't know, come back. Because as much as I understood the context regarding the attitudes and environment that provoked Gamergate, Gamergate itself was a complete clusterfuck. And a large part of the reason for that was because of all the fucking groups and interests that were trying to co-opt it. And my irritation regarding that hit a fucking boiling point in July 2015, which is when I started my channel and uploaded my first video.
It begins!
So for those who are unaware, this is a man named Jordan Owen. Jordan Owen likes to think of himself as something of a writer. He's also a guitarist who graduated with some kind of music degree from Berkeley, I think. He's also big into Ayn Rand and libertarianism, but you will probably know him as one of the co-creators of a documentary called The Sarkeesian Effect, which he co-created with a guy called Davis Arini. Now, Davis Arini is one of the original alt-right grifters who latched onto Gamergate. He was alt-right before anyone had even heard of the alt-right. This was when they were making do calling themselves wanky shit like the Dark Enlightenment. And yeah, people always give guys like Jordan Owen and frankly everyone who did the whole centrist thing during Gamergate a lot of shit for accepting or being accepting of people like Arini. But in their defense, it was a really weird time because those motherfuckers were presented with the greatest angle that they could have, and they worked that shit to the bone. Because as much as all the bullshit about we gotta take on the SJWs and my friend speech, as much as all that shit is incredibly overplayed, it did come from somewhere. I mean, those people, they're still around. You go to a forum like Reset Era or something, you'll find a bunch of them. Like, they banned Destiny, for fuck's sake. And I can already hear someone going, but it's just a small community, that's barely, they don't matter, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, it's a small community of people, but people forget. When this shit started, when these arguments and cliches and tropes were being formed, this entire thing was very, very small. It was two very small groups of people slinging shit at each other about stuff that very few people who weren't involved gave a fuck about at the time. I remembered explaining this shit to friends of mine when it was happening, and I remember them not giving the tiniest fuck about it. They were like, why are you wasting my time on this bullshit? Now, fast forward 4 years later, the same people I could rely on to not give a fuck about any of this stuff are now sitting around talking about, oh fucking hate SJWs, me, after watching the last SJW's Wrecked compilation to get over 4 million views. Fuck you! Fuck you! You know, quality content. But this shit had an origin, and I'm not trying to justify it, I'm just giving it to you so you can understand it. Think of it whatever the fuck you will. I'm just saying, before you judge anyone too harshly, just imagine this kind of scenario. Just imagine you see someone who's like 16 years old, just living life, and they see somebody talking about how every video game protagonist is a white male with 5 o'clock shadow. I mean, kind of hyperbolic point, but there's some legitimacy to it, so who gives a fuck? But, you know, you're 16 years old. So what do? You make the mistake of expressing your opinion.
Well, I don't really care if my protagonist is like black or female. I just really want a good game.
Only for some ridiculous walking parody of progressive to call that kid a racist or a sexist for voicing that opinion. Naturally prompting them to come back with asking,
But I said I don't care. How is that racist?
Only to get the response of, it's not my job to educate you. Fuck off. Which I mean, I gotta be honest, in fairness, lately I find myself sympathizing a great deal with that line of rebuttal because, whoo, these motherfuckers, they're testing. They really are. It's still a problem. Because it's at this point that the 16-year-old who you just told to fuck off, it's at that point that they become a prime target for the Nazis and special interest groups, who will seize upon that opportunity to be like,
oh no, you just voiced your opinion and they called you a sexist and a racist. They do that to us all the time. Let me break this whole thing down for you. It starts with a little something you may have heard of called
A few moments later.
and then they're gone. And then they're gone. It sounds fucking stupid, but if you want to know how well that tactic works, just, you know, fucking look around. Type feminism in the search bar, see what comes back. But, you know, hopefully now that we've explained that climate a little bit, you can understand more why someone like Jordan Owen would have found himself working with someone like Davis Arini. It was a really, really fucking weird time. But getting back to the whole Owen and Arini thing, basically, with the Sarkeesian effect, they saw the amount of money being thrown around during Gamergate for all kinds of stupid shit, and they jumped at the opportunity to essentially crowdfund their shot at becoming professional filmmakers.
You're probably wondering why we would go to the trouble to make a feature film when YouTube is so readily accessible. Well, remember that Anita Sarkeesian got almost $160,000 to produce her YouTube videos with no discernible improvement in quality.
But Jordan and I, we already make high-quality YouTube videos. With this project, we're taking it to the next level. We're going to be traveling all over the US and Canada. We are going to be doing proper investigative journalism. We're going to create a high-quality product that will go down in the annals of history as a high-quality documentary that, with any luck, changes the world.
Ugh, as if.
The problem they quickly ran into, though, was that Jordan didn't know a great deal about filmmaking, and unfortunately for him, that accurate assessment of his own abilities made him team up with Davis Arini, who, in addition to being one of the biggest bullshit artists to have ever sat in front of a camera, or quite possibly anywhere ever, also, as a bonus, has all the artistic ability of a chimpanzee with a paintbrush shoved up its fucking rectum. You know, everything you want in your fucking director and editor, which is what Davis Arini would be responsible for. They got funded to the tune of about $15,000 a month, I think, so the support behind this was quite considerable. Jordan, to his credit, seemed to genuinely want to make a good documentary. How good that could have possibly been, given the subject matter, is entirely debatable. What would have been a fucking amazing documentary would have been the making of it. Oh, how I would love to see that. Even just a narration. Just tell me stories about working with Davis Arini on any kind of creative project. It would be fucking amazing. Jordan, for real, it would rival Lost in La Mancha. I mean, just everyone would want to see it. I'm just putting it out there. But anyway, so whilst Jordan Owen seemed to want to make a good documentary, Arini, on the other hand, seemed to just want to do everything he could to make it appear as though he was doing something whilst doing as little as possible in order to keep the money ticking in. There was, however, one snag here. That being that Jordan Owen was the person who was controlling the money. If Arini wanted money, he had to go to Jordan for it. And as you can imagine, this created a great deal of tension between the two, which resulted in them splitting not once, but twice. The first split occurred in March 2015. Yeah, we're going deep lore here. And that split came about basically due to Jordan Owen finally getting sick of Davis Arini's shit.
I have decided that it is best for me and best for the project that I terminate my working relationship with Davis Arini.
This resulted in what appeared to be a massive gaslighting attempt by Arini, which was kind of supported by the anti-SJW Gamergate community. I mean, it basically entailed Davis Arini doing everything he could to make Jordan Owen look as bad as possible in order to pressure him into falling in line. This included leaking Skype conversations, trying to turn prominent YouTubers and mutual friends against him, and comparing him to fucking Elliot Rodger. The end result being most people in the community tacitly siding with Arini and pressuring Jordan Owen to just get over it and reunite with Arini to finish the project, which he did.
Owen Arini Productions is back in business.
Only for Arini to put out this video in July the same year, appealing for further funding via a Fund Anything campaign to have like post-production on the Sarkeesian effect.
Because as you know, Jordan and I have been drastically under budget from the very beginning on this.
What? Post-production, for anyone who's wondering in this instance, is essentially Davis Arini sitting on his ass on a laptop in his room. $15,000. Now the problem with this will become apparent in a minute, but before we get to that, you have to also understand that in addition to this video, Arini sent a review copy of the Sarkeesian effect to the YouTubers Mundane Matt and Sargon of Akkad, with a view to them promoting the fundraiser on their channels. Mundane Matt never did this. Sargon, on the other hand, yeah, he did. Which was really unfortunate considering that within a matter of hours, this happened.
Do not give any money to the GoFundMe, or the Fund Anything campaign that Davis has set up. Davis has been wasting time for 6 months now. He has missed multiple deadlines. He has screwed up our finances royally. He has fucked up everything to do with this production left and right, and wants another $15,000. But he is lying to you. He is acting completely without my approval and dragging me into it. So, no. When he says Jordan and I set up this fundraiser, no, we didn't.
It turns out Davis Arini was up to a little bit of fuckery. Apparently, the consequence of Jordan Owen having control of all the money and just wanting to get the fucking film finished was conflicting with Davis's desire to keep that gravy train rolling indefinitely. So Davis Arini hatched a plan to initiate another round of funding for $15,000 that they didn't need in a manner where he could control all of the money. Because by all accounts, the website that he chose to use, Fund Anything, is just a direct transfer, meaning that once you donated anything to that Fund Anything campaign, the money goes straight to your PayPal account. Davis Arini knew all of this. He set up the fundraiser without Jordan's knowledge or permission to secure a source of funding that he controlled. He did this by deceiving not only the people who donated under false pretenses that this money was necessary for the stated purpose, but by deceiving Sargon into promoting this fundraiser under false pretenses. There is a word we use to describe the act of obtaining money by deception. It's called fraud, and that's what Davis Arini did. I think he managed to get somewhere in the region of about $1,500, but the dollar amount isn't really all that important. What was important was the fact that fucking nobody was talking about this shit. Nobody. Like, for all the talk of ethics in games journalism, here you have a guy running around calling himself a journalist. I mean, for fuck's sake, the Sarkeesian effect was pitched as a journalistic endeavor.
This ultimate response to the social justice warrior agenda will be a groundbreaking work of investigative journalism.
This is going to be a serious work of investigative journalism.
And here you have a guy trying to defraud people and nobody's saying a fucking thing? Ethics in games journalism. Silence. Here you have a guy running around trying to defraud people and silence. Like, Sargon promoted this shit to his audience. You'd think his audience would deserve a little heads up. Silence. And then slowly but surely, it began. I started hearing whispers about how it's just petty drama, how Jordan should just get over it and finish the movie, how Jordan is unhinged and mentally ill. The exact same gaslighting bullshit I heard the first time Jordan and Arini split. I was hearing tons of shit about how much of a piece of shit Jordan Owen was, yet absolutely fuck and all about Davis Arini, or the money that he had gotten under false pretenses. It was like a massive elephant that everyone was bending over backwards to avoid talking about. So I decided to make a video. and I called that video the Arini in the Room. Because the discussion about ethics in games journalism, no matter how much of a meme that fucking shit turned out to be, was something that I wanted to have. And I wanted to have it without being a complete fucking hypocrite. I wanted, in the event that someone mentioned any of this shit to me, to be able to say, well, fuck the rest of those cowards who buried their heads in the sand. I'm my own person, and if you check my channel, you'll see a video of me calling that shit out. Now, would you like to get back to what we were actually talking about, or are we done? That's why I made my first video. That's why I started my channel. I wasn't sitting around desperate for people to pay attention to me. I wasn't looking at shit other people were doing and thinking to myself, wow, there's a really low barrier of entry for this. I should probably get involved.
Like, you know what? This isn't, there's not that high of a barrier to entry to this. I should do this too.
I wasn't looking to join some fucking community and hang out with my favorite e-celebs. And I sure as shit wasn't looking for people's fucking money. Because I hate to break this to you people, but until you reach very significant numbers, which most of us won't, you'd make more money cleaning fucking toilets. I mean, the money you get is great if you look at it as extra money for shit you would have done anyway, but if you're looking at this as some actual source of income or career, you fucked up. Especially if you're on that, I'm not a Nazi, I just like the Nazi memes thing. Because that shit's getting locked off like fucking woo. If your stock was in Nazi memes, that shit is plummeting. But yeah, back to me. Like, I had no intention of making any more than one video. It just so happened, when I was making that video, I really enjoyed it. There's something very cathartic about recording a video, and recording is my least favorite part. Like, this bit right here, like, this is weirdly fun for me, and it's still the worst part of the process. So, you know what the least enjoyable part of being a YouTuber and making videos is? And I know people are gonna fucking hate to hear this, but it's uploading the fucking thing. Which sucks, because it's kind of the entire point. Like, if anyone wants to simulate what running a YouTube channel is like, it's really simple. Just get a pin, poke it through an elastic band, wrap that elastic band around your wrist, and then anytime you think of something interesting or funny, just pull back on that motherfucker and just whack. Because that's kind of what it's like. People view running a YouTube channel as being top down when it's actually very much bottom up. It's not 10,000 people telling you how awesome you are. It's 9,000 people who don't give a fuck, 100 who like you, and about 900 who seem to exist to tell you how much of a fucking idiot you are. And let's be clear, that's if you've got it good. If you're like Riley Dennis or something, then you probably don't even know who the fuck your audience is, because your channel is a never-ending revolving door of arseholes being directed to you by other arseholes, taking you out of context and being as uncharitable as possible for an audience of fucking idiots who are mad as hell but have no idea why. And before anyone comes at me with that bullshit of like, oh, so you agree with everything Riley Dennis says now? No, I don't think I agree with anyone on everything. But not everyone is a fucking child. I can at least respect her. Like, she gets so much shit and she's still there, still putting out videos, giving 0 fucks about you parasites. And she's out here making videos playing Fortnite whilst unboxing fucking dildos. She don't give a fuck.
Oh yeah? Then why is she always talking about harassment?
Maybe because she's always getting harassed. I mean, just a thought. And I have to say, it makes me laugh when I hear people discount that shit, because in my experience, the people who are the fastest to dismiss the idea of people being harassed and disregard such claims as people playing the victim are usually the first motherfuckers to claim victimhood and harassment when it happens to themselves.
Tomorrow, going on, there are articles about me, and some of them will say something like, I abused her, or she is somehow the victim.
Pause. Do you not understand the irony of we're talking about people labeling themselves as victims, and you are labeling yourself as victim of a crime that has not occurred?
No,
you're talking about articles that are being written.
Because it's fine when it's happening to everyone else, but when it's happening to you, oh shit, that's different. And it was actually that mentality, but from a different perspective, that kind of sucked me into the whole anti-SJW thing. Because as a result of that video that I made, the Arini in the Room, I saw the exact same shit happening with Sargon. I saw a mob of people who always claim to care about harassment actually mobbing up on Sargon. Like, the thing they always claim to care about and fight against, targeted harassment. I saw people do that shit to Sargon, and I saw them do it because they tried to use me as a cudgel to beat him over the head with. And that kind of threw me through this weird loop, because I was in this position where I was like, okay, I want to criticize this guy, but but I don't want to arm a bunch of assholes with rocks to throw at him. Because when I made that video about Davis Arini and his fraud, I gave that community a lot of shit for turning a blind eye to it. And at some point, Sargon showed up in the comments, and because back then you had a fully integrated Google Plus, which was a fucking nightmare, when someone like Sargon commented on your video, that comment would show up in his Google Plus feed. So suddenly you'd have tons of people, well, yeah, seemingly tons. Tons for somebody who's used to getting nothing. But you just suddenly have tons of people show up on a channel with 5 subscribers, and it's weird, man. It was really weird to just suddenly have all of these people show up on your channel, not giving a fuck about who you are or what you said in the video, just desperate to shit on you. All in the hope that their senpai will see them, shit on you, and give them a little tummy rub, maybe a pat on the head. Which is a behavior I absolutely fucking despise, which has only gotten worse as the communities and the people involved in them have gotten worse. Especially Sargon. Like, Sargon morons are a very special blend of moron. They're morons who see themselves as intellectuals. It's really, really weird. Like, he'll quote tweet you, willfully and deliberately misrepresent what you said, and then you get a bunch of fucking idiots asking you to defend shit you never said. Which, I'm just gonna put this out there. Do you think if he wasn't absolutely sure that his audience were a bunch of fucking morons who will blindly believe any bullshit he tells them, would he expect to be able to get away with that kind of shit? The answer, my friend, is no. So what does that tell you about how he views his audience? Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
But I'm getting ahead of myself here, because when Sargon left a comment on my video saying that he's not a hypocrite for calling out unethical journalists whilst turning a blind eye to Davis Arini defrauding his audience because he doesn't consider Davis Arini to be a journalist, which, by the way, was the point Davis Arini flipped on him, because apparently Davis Arini took particular exception to the idea that he's not a journalist, which, I mean, maybe I'm biased, I thought that was fucking hilarious. But in addition to being hilarious, it also demonstrates how much of a fucking cop-out that line of bullshit by Sargon was, because whether or not Davis Arini is a journalist has fucking nothing to do with having the basic decency to inform people who may have been scammed based on shit that they saw on your channel that they may have been scammed. As you can probably guess, I had a lot to say about this shit, but I didn't want to do it in a thread with like 60 other people on my own fucking channel. And considering it was a comment on a video on my channel, I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just make a video responding to this comment. So I did. I made a video responding to that comment because fuck it. At the time, I had like 5 subs, so who gives a fuck? Like, my entire argument with Sargon at that point was essentially like, dude, you took Davis Arini at his word. You promoted his fraudulent Fund Anything campaign to your audience. People may have given him money on the basis of you directing them to that fundraiser. At the very least, those people deserve to know that they may have been ripped off, so that they have all the information they may require in case they decide that they want to get a refund. Maybe they decide they don't want to be fucking scammed. And Sargon was fucking adamant that he wouldn't do this. And I couldn't for life of me understand why he wouldn't do this at the time. Like, everything he was saying either made no fucking sense or made him look like a complete hypocrite. And it was at this point that someone told me to stop spamming my videos to people on Twitter, which was really confusing to me because I didn't have a Twitter. Like, some of you may remember earlier when I said that I hated social media. Yeah. Didn't have a Twitter. So I went off and created one just to see what the fuck they were talking about, and as it turned out, I had created something of a shitstorm. And the reason for that was a bunch of people were going around on Twitter spreading my videos, and they weren't spreading them in a particularly positive way. They weren't simply sharing it on their timeline with a, hey, go watch this video kind of thing. They seemed to be actively seeking out anyone who ever said a kind word to Sargon and giving them some kind of, haha, Sargon got owned by Wozlee. And there was a bunch of this shit going on, and I remember one in particular because they named their account Evil Sargon, and they were taking this shit to another level. It was fucking insane. Like, to this day, it's still up. You can check the account. It's still there. I mean, just fucking look at this shit. And apparently they still follow me. Huh. Nice. But yet, this shit right here, this fucked me up quite considerably. Because looking at this shit, suddenly I understood. I got the reason why he probably wouldn't want to come out and admit to fucking up on the Arini thing. It made sense to me. And once you start going down that path, you start second guessing all kinds of stuff. Like, did I ever actually hear Sargon define what he thinks a journalist is? I mean, it's fucking obvious to me that a journalist is anyone doing journalism, which is producing and distributing reports of recent events. But what if Sargon has his own opinion on what journalism is? What if his definition is some really, really narrow and dumb shit? What if I am attributing to him knowledge that he doesn't actually have? What if I'm assuming he has standards that he's never actually claimed to have, but that I assumed he had based on my perception of the things that he said and did? Which, by the way, is a trap I see people fall into all the fucking time. I mean, Louis Leval did an epic one when he made himself look like a complete fucking idiot in his conversation with Mr. Metica. Fucking assuming that he has some deep insight into Metica's personal philosophy or politics because he watched him shit on a few furries.
The thing is, Jim, is that I know that based on watching your channel, I've been following you for a while. You don't know who I am, but I've been following you for a while. And I like your channel. I like your shit. And I like what you do. But the thing is that I know that ultimately, like, in terms of your beliefs, you really don't, they're really in alignment with Sargon. You don't.
What are my beliefs?
You're a liberal. You're in favor of individual rights. You don't like the collectivists and the totalitarians that are out there trying to.
What do you mean by individual? I mean, if you know my political ideology, what do you mean by individual rights?
Specifically, individual rights, property rights, etc.
And conservatives don't believe in property rights?
When did I fucking say that?
You just said you were identifying me as a liberal. I asked you to give me an example. You said property rights. So I'm saying that that's what makes me a liberal. That would mean conservatives don't believe in it, right?
You're being ridiculously obtuse.
I'm not being obtuse. You're the one that gave the example. I'm asking and following up. Do you mean that conservatives don't believe in property rights?
I just said no. They obviously do.
So then how do you know I'm a liberal that lines up with Sargon? I call that a slam dunk. That's a swish. That's from fucking half court.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's half court, buddy. You can hear it. It's on the clock.
In terms of your philosophy, you do believe it very similar to his in terms of what you believe. You're against collectivism, are you not?
I mean, Louis, for fuck's sake, how many liberals do you know that go around quoting O'Sullivan's Law? Are you fucking high? And you'd think Louis would get the hint after that shit, but no. And this is why I always gave people in the whole anti-SJW thing the benefit of the doubt, admittedly way more than I should have. It was because of this shit. And that fucked up my whole perspective. It made me overly concerned about whether or not these criticisms are fair, when really the emphasis should have been on whether or not they were valid. Because I was operating under the assumption, based on my own observations, that these people were being put into an impossible situation. Like during 2014, most of them were liberals, or claimed to be liberals, yet they were constantly being called right-wing, and the consequence of that was that they were increasingly finding themselves surrounded by right-wingers, and they begrudgingly found themselves becoming the tip of a spear for a load of bullshit that they didn't even agree with.
Stop putting everything in the frame of your war on the SJWs. The fuck do you think this is?
And that's why the underlying goal of almost every video I ever made was trying to create a space for people to be able to be themselves. The irony being that in the process, I fell into the same trap that they did. I ended up walking this weird tightrope between not wanting to endorse this shit, but at the same time, not wanting to endorse this shit, which resulted in me heavily criticizing people I largely agree with over trivial bullshit, whilst making these weird fucking videos defending people I didn't agree with, let alone even like, who, honestly, they don't even deserve to be fucking defended. And the longer that shit went on, the worse it got. Especially when you take into account the way Gamergate unraveled into being a complete fucking farce, which I know some people are gonna get weird about. So, okay, fine. Allow me to present 3 things which, in my opinion, make Gamergate as a movement for ethical games journalism fucking impossible to defend. Coming in at number 1, Five Guys. You remember this meme? One of the biggest memes of Gamergate? Yeah, well, you see these 2 guys here? There is absolutely no fucking evidence that these 2 guys had anything to do with anything. Someone just threw their fucking Twitter bio into a Photoshop document because they needed 5 people for the fucking meme to work. And I know what some people are thinking. Some people will be like, well, hang on a minute. Didn't Mr. Metica go through all of these people in the original conspiracy videos? No. What he does, he talks about Joshua Boggs, he talks about Robin Arnott, he talks about Nathan Grayson, and then goes off into some other shit, and never actually comes back to talking about these two. They just got thrown out there for no reason. Just fuck it, why not? Number 2, Candace Owens validates Zoe Quinn and BTFO's Gamergate. Now this one was something of a personal observation. I don't know how many people picked up on this, but I've never heard anybody else talk about it, so here we go. One of the driving narratives behind Gamergate was the issue of censorship. And this exploded after a bunch of threads were mass deleted on Reddit. Now, the stated reason behind this was that Reddit has guidelines regarding witch hunts, and these threads definitely qualified, especially after people started posting Zoe Quinn's docs in that thread. And right now, I can sense someone hunched over their keyboard ready to give me shit about,
oh, that wasn't Zoe Quinn's docs, it was a fake docs. It was someone posted that to censor everyone. It's a false flag, false flag.
And then they'll cite something like this image here. Now this image is, in a word, bollocks. This image is trying to convey 2 main pieces of information. The first piece of information is that Zoe Quinn had a Hawaii area code on her phone number, and the second piece of information is that according to a tracker on her website that she used to tell people, like friends and family, whereabouts in the United States she had never been to Hawaii. The logic being, if she has never been to Hawaii, why would she have a Hawaii area code as a phone number? Now for me, to my shame, I don't know anything about cellular networks in America, or anywhere frankly, so I didn't know if this was a valid point. But I'm also working under the assumption that if you can just have a number from any area code, this wouldn't be a point worth making. Also, why the fuck would you have a Hawaii area code if you were never in Hawaii? That doesn't make any sense. So it did always seem kind of weird to me, and the only person who could ever answer that shit was Zoe Quinn herself, who, as far as I know, never did. So I had to kind of shrug my shoulders and go, fuck it, I don't know. Then something weird happened. Candace Owens. Yes, that one, also known as Red Pill Black, came onto the scene. She had tried to start a website called Social Autopsy, which at the time I really disliked everything about Social Autopsy, as it essentially functioned like a doxing website. However, I've since changed my mind on that, or at least become incredibly apathetic to it, because when talking to somebody else, we were talking about how awful it would have been to just allow anyone to utilize the site to dox people they don't like for random shit they said online. And then someone completely fucks my shit up with one question. And that question was, don't you think it would basically be like cow or kiwi farms, but for the kind of people who would post on cow or kiwi farms? You know, the kind of people who would deserve to be on some shit like that, rather than the mentally ill people they typically go after.
I want everything about my house off the internet!
Queen might have to suck the Pope's cock for all I know.
And you know, I gotta say, suddenly I was like, you're right, man. Fuck 'em. But one person who didn't have that attitude was Zoe Quinn. And she wanted to explain to Candace Owens why her website would be a bad idea. Problem is, Zoe had no idea what the fuck she was dealing with. Candace Owens is a predatory motherfucker. She is ambition personified. The only thing she gives a fuck about is getting ahead. And God help you if you're standing in the way of that, cause she will fucking cut you. I mean, for God's sake, just look at that face. She looks like she's trying to shoot fire from her fucking eyes. So, Zoe realizes after talking to Candace Owens that Candace ain't playing. So Zoe does what Zoe always fucking does and rallies her people to fuck Candace's shit up. And it's at this point that Candace loses her shit and goes, oh, okay, you wanna play? Fine. Bring me Gamergate. Whoever the fuck or whatever the fuck Gamergate is, bring Gamergate to me. I need to talk. And talk she did. And it was as a result of that she wrote an article. And it was in this article I noticed something, a little detail that I don't think a lot of people picked up on. That detail being, and I quote, I normally keep the grass cut low. The business of finance had properly exposed me to the idea of snakes. I had taken away from it the ability to spot one from a mile away, but Zoe was a victim and managed to slide past my defenses easily. My guard was fully blown when she phoned me at 9:50 p.m. from a Hawaii number.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Hawaii. Number. This is from Candace Owens. This is Candace Owens, who in the midst of trying to bludgeon Zoe Quinn to death with the fucking corpse of Gamergate, reveals that Zoe Quinn does in fact use a Hawaii number, which means that those threads were legitimately deleted because of doxing. Her doxing. That the censorship bullshit was exactly that, bullshit. And not only was that the case, but everyone spreading this fucking document uncensored far from demonstrating Zoe to be a liar, was in fact further doxing her. Yes, Gamergate was really that fucking dumb. But you know something else? It was that dumb by design. Which brings us to number 3. Ethics in trailing off into uncontrollable laughter. So, if you had to attribute Gamergate as a thing to one person, if you had to pick one person who influenced and shaped Gamergate, what it was and what it became about more than anybody else, I think you'd be fucking insane if you said any name other than Internet Aristocrat, aka Mr. Metica, aka Jim. There were tons of people doing tons of shit during Gamergate, but the guy who crystallized it and who solidified the narrative more than anyone else was Mr. Metica. It's no coincidence that when Adam Baldwin tweeted out Gamergate for the very first time, the only thing in that tweet was a hashtag and Mr. Metica's conspiracy videos. Which, like most of his videos of this type that he does, more often than not, in retrospect, turn out to be complete fucking garbage. Usually just an attempt to pander to a mob of morons by feeding them their own bullshit. And it was these videos that set up everything that Gamergate would become, including all of the cringy as all fuck Gamers Rise Up bullshit. If you haven't watched those videos in a while, I highly recommend you go check them out because, yay, they did not age well. I mean, the first one ends like this.
We, the fucking fans, the gamers, over the decades, have raised our hobby up into a billion-dollar worldwide industry. Not these assholes. They make money off our interest, not the fucking other way around. We hold the power here. They don't. And it is fucking time that gamers sent game journalists a very clear goddamn message. And that fucking message should be,
I'm gonna pull the whole thing down.
Are you serious?
I'm gonna bring the whole
This is
fucking
torture.
temple down on your head.
You're torturing me and everyone else watching.
But the other thing which is prevalent throughout these videos is a theme of ethics in games journalism. They are full of ranting about the Fifth Estate, about corrupt journalism, and even
ethics.
Which, for people who weren't around for Gamergate, might be surprising because he's singing a very different song these days.
It's about ethics in games journalism. He's got some more gems in here, so just pay attention. You know, V and Pol are known as liberal central on the internet. I think we can all agree on that. Super liberal. Super liberal. And they were doing it for ethics in games journalism.
So why is this relevant or helpful? It's relevant because the ethics in games journalism angle, despite being a complete fucking meme, is the only possible lens by which you can look at Gamergate as being anything other than a bunch of fucking idiots freaking out about literally nothing. What you have here is the person whose video started Gamergate, the person who crystallized the entire fucking narrative, the person who more than anyone else defined the mood or fucking, I don't know, ethos of that entire thing, literally laughing at the idea that it was about ethics, even though he was one of the people selling the ethics angle to whip up an angry mob. An angle that he clearly never fucking believed. And this is incredibly helpful because there's a growing desire from certain people with big beards and even bigger waistlines to push the idea of what many people are calling Gamergate 2.0. Now, we're gonna correct the record on why certain people would have an interest in doing that in a video after the next one and why nobody wants any fucking part of it. But on the off chance that doesn't hold and people do start buying into the bullshit of, oh, we need to redeem Gamergate to prove it was about ethics and shit. Isn't it great to have the guy who popularized that crap literally laughing about the assertion that that is what it was about? The mere mention of ethics makes him fucking laugh. I'd say that's kind of useful. And just to be clear, these are just 3 things that I observed over time that I don't see other people talk about. If you really wanted to do the extended edition of all the ways Gamergate was a mistake, you'd need a full run on HBO. But like I said, this isn't really a video about Gamergate. This is about answering that question, what happened to you? Because my response to that would be, nothing. I am who I've always been. I still have a soft spot for dark humor and fucked up jokes, but I've come to realize that the vast majority of people on the internet who would claim the same are fucking idiots. Like, my line for when a joke stops being a joke has always been when you suspect the joke is real or becoming real. If someone jokes, what do you tell a woman with 2 black eyes? Nothing, you've already told her twice. Regardless of whether or not you think that's funny, you stop treating it as a joke when you see the person's wife or girlfriend show up with bruises on their face. Because at that point, you know it's not a joke. It's not coming from a place of satire or fun, it's coming from a place of sadism. I don't want to hear Michael Vick tell a joke about animal abuse. I don't want to hear a fucking rape joke from Bill Cosby. And I ain't trying to hear fucking jokes about black or Jewish people from the likes of Richard Spencer and Mike fucking Enoch. And more broadly, people who are cool with them. And when, over time, it looks more and more like the people around me in that space either don't seem to understand the distinction or are incapable of telling the difference, another question starts to become more and more prominent. That question being, if you do nothing to differentiate yourself from the fucked up shit you see all around you, why the fuck should anyone else? When people say to you, hey, you know, you can only say Nazi shit so many times before you just start to look like a Nazi. If your response to that is to go on a march with literal Nazis where you remark about how surprised you are at the lack of swastikas and how you thought there would be more? By what fucking logic do you then take issue with people suggesting that you kinda look like a fucking Nazi? Which would be fine if you're a Nazi. But if you're not a Nazi, doing everything in your power to look like one is really fucking stupid. And it was this that made me constantly test the waters, and every time I did, I noticed a common excuse people would throw up. You'd hear the same shit again and again. Oh, but the left are the real threat because blah 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 blah. Free speech, blah 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 blah. Universities, which is why we have to annihilate everything that's even remotely considered left-wing, do nothing but defend and empower the right regardless of how batshit insane and extreme their bullshit gets, and then, when that left-wing platform has been ground into dust, I assume will be the point where the classical liberals will imitate the actions of the tiger as their fat retarded asses get booted into the gas chambers because they tried to claim that they were part black or Jewish in an effort to not be demonetized for their bullshit. But I also got another line of bullshit, which was, oh, I would criticize the right, but it just never seems to come up, which is a different thing. The idea that you have to go out of your way to platform, promote, and defend Nazis as they attempt to tear down everything you claim to value is a brand of insanity that you can't really reason with because it defies fucking reason. Like, the only way to deal with that is just constantly push back every time you hear the bullshit. You can't really do anything with it. But the idea that people would criticize this shit if it ever came up, that if it was ever put on the table, they would address it, and the only reason they didn't is because it hasn't been properly tabled? Yeah, we can put that to the test. You can force that shit to happen. And if you do, one way or another, people are gonna get forced into a position. Once we do that shit, the days of, oh no, we're just fellow travelers, that shit's done. If you can force people to take a definitive stance on this shit one way or another, then at least you know where you stand and you can act accordingly. Which is why when another YouTuber called Crow and T approached me about joining a Discord server going after the alt-right, I was like,
fucking finally.
Because I knew one way or another this was gonna start some shit. What I didn't know was how much shit and how many varieties was going to be started. Now, we're talking about a shit show that in many ways is still going on to this fucking day. I accepted an invite to that server in September 2017. So, for anyone who gives a shit, feel free to join me for part 2.
And remember, we live in a society.